It all began on a typical Friday night when I invited my friend Emily over for dinner. We had planned a casual evening to catch up, share some laughs, and unwind. Little did I know, the night would take an unexpected turn, leaving me with memories that would linger. My stepson Alex had recently returned from college, and I thought it would be nice to include him. He had always been polite and respectful, but something about him seemed different that evening, though I couldn't quite place it. While I prepared dinner in the kitchen, Emily arrived, effortlessly elegant as always. She radiated a certain glow, and her laughter brought a warm, inviting atmosphere. I loved having her around. Her energy made everything feel lighter. Alex entered the kitchen shortly afterward, offering to help with the food. I glanced at him, noticing how much he had changed. He had become taller and more self-assured. His gaze lingered on me a bit longer than usual, but I brushed it off, assuming it was just my imagination. We settled at the dining table, the atmosphere relaxed and informal. The wine flowed and conversation drifted seamlessly across various topics. Emily was, as always, engaging, and she quickly captured Alex's attention. They exchanged jokes and playful banter, which made me smile. I assumed it was harmless given the age difference, but as the evening went on, I noticed subtle shifts in Alex's demeanor. His looks at Emily grew more intense, and I caught him glancing at her when he thought no one was watching. A strange tension began to settle in the room, though I couldn't quite figure out why. As the conversation continued, Emily playfully placed her hand on Alex's arm, laughing at something he said. I felt a flicker of jealousy rise within me, but I brushed it off, reminding myself it was innocent. Yet, Alex seemed to be relishing the attention a bit too much. He met my gaze from across the table, and there was something in his eyes, a look that sent a shiver through me. Then, out of nowhere, he reached over and gently brushed a strand of hair from my face, letting his touch linger on my skin. The unexpected gesture left me momentarily stunned, and I felt my breath catch. Emily, still engrossed in the conversation, hadn't noticed. I struggled to keep my composure as I processed what had just happened. Dinner continued, but an unspoken tension filled the air. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Every so often I'd catch Alex looking at me, his gaze intense, and I began to question everything. Was I imagining it? Was this just an innocent family dinner, or was there something deeper beneath the surface? As dinner wound down, things took an unexpected turn. When I stood to clear the table, Alex's hand brushed against my lower back in a way that didn't feel accidental. My body tensed and warmth rushed to my cheeks. It was subtle, but it was enough to make my thoughts race. I glanced at him, and he smiled as if nothing unusual had happened, but I knew what I felt, and it was undeniable. Unaware of the tension building between Alex and me, Emily suggested we move to the living room for dessert. I agreed, attempting to steady my racing thoughts. I couldn't believe what was happening. Was Alex flirting with me? Was he crossing a line? I couldn't look at Emily without a pang of guilt, but at the same time, I couldn't ignore the electric charge that seemed to fill the room whenever Alex was near. We moved to the couch, with Alex on one side of me and Emily on the other. As we chatted, I could feel the tension in the air growing stronger. Alex's leg brushed against mine, and each time he moved, my pulse quickened. It felt intentional, as if he was testing boundaries. I tried to focus on the conversation, but my mind kept drifting to the subtle touches, the lingering glances, and the magnetic pull between us. Then, as Emily got up to pour more wine, Alex leaned in close, his breath warm on my neck as he whispered, "You look beautiful tonight." His words sent a shockwave through me. In that moment, I knew this was no accident or misunderstanding. He was testing me, pushing limits I never thought would be crossed. A whirlwind of emotions, confusion, excitement, guilt, and desire filled me. Emily returned, interrupting the moment, but the tension remained. I couldn't meet Alex's gaze without feeling like something risky and thrilling was unfolding right in front of Emily, without her noticing. My heart pounded as I tried to keep the conversation light, but the air was charged with far more than small talk. As the evening went on, Alex grew bolder. His hand would occasionally brush against mine, his foot nudging mine beneath the table. I couldn't believe what was happening, yet I didn't stop it. There was something intoxicating about the forbidden nature of it all, something that drew me in, even though I knew it was wrong. Emily, still unaware of the tension between Alex and me, announced that it was time for her to leave. I walked her to the door, feeling an odd mix of relief and anxiety. As I hugged her goodbye, I couldn't help but feel guilty for everything that had transpired at the dinner table. But when I turned back to see Alex standing there with that same intense gaze, all thoughts of guilt faded. With Emily gone, the house felt quieter, more intimate. Now alone with Alex, the tension that had been building all evening finally came to a head. He moved closer, his gaze fixed intently on me. I felt the warmth radiating from him, every nerve in my body heightened. I knew I should step back, create some space, but I stayed where I was, waiting to see what might unfold. What happened next was beyond anything I could have anticipated. Without a word, Alex closed the gap between us, his hands softly cupping my face as he leaned in and kissed me. The kiss started gently but quickly intensified as I responded, my mind abandoning all rational thought, surrendering to the moment. All the tension that had simmered throughout the evening found release. When we finally broke apart, I was left breathless, my heart pounding wildly. Alex looked at me with a blend of desire and something else I couldn't quite identify. I knew right then that nothing between us would ever be the same. What began as a casual dinner had transformed into something complicated, something I wasn't sure I could manage. But even as I stood there, trying to process what had happened, I couldn't deny the thrill of the danger, the excitement, and the sheer intensity. I didn't know where things would lead, but one thing was clear: this was only the beginning. As the night continued, I found myself caught in the moment, struggling to balance what had just happened with what I knew was right. Alex stood there, waiting, his gaze still locked on mine, filled with an intensity that sent chills down my spine. I wanted to speak, to break the thick silence between us, but words wouldn't come. My mind spun with questions, doubts, and emotions I wasn't prepared to confront. Alex stepped closer, his hand brushing against mine, sending a fresh wave of electricity through me. I had never looked at him this way before. He had always been just my stepson, part of my family, someone I cared for, but not in this way. But tonight, everything felt different, and the boundaries that once seemed so clear were now blurred. "I've always felt something for you," Alex finally said, his voice slow and weighted with emotion. But tonight, I couldn't hold back anymore. His confession hit me like a tidal wave, and I could hardly believe what I was hearing. A mixture of shock, confusion, and, dare I admit, excitement filled me. No one had ever looked at me the way Alex did now, with such raw desire. It was overwhelming, and a part of me wanted to give in, to see where this dangerous new path could lead. But another part of me screamed that this was wrong, that I had to stop it before it went too far. "Alex, we can't," I whispered, though even as I said it, I wasn't sure I meant it. My resolve was weakening, and I could feel myself being pulled deeper into the moment. "But why not?" Alex asked softly, his voice gentle but determined. "I know you feel it too. I see it in the way you look at me, in how you responded tonight. This isn't one-sided." His words were like a mirror, showing me the feelings I'd been trying to ignore. I couldn't argue with him because deep down I knew he was right. I did feel something powerful and undeniable. And as much as I wanted to push it all away, to act as though nothing had changed, I knew that was no longer possible. Before I could respond, Alex stepped even closer, his hand sliding gently up my arm, sending warmth through my body. His touch was soft and careful, as if he was waiting for my consent to continue. In that moment, I realized I wasn't resisting anymore. I had already crossed a line, and there was no turning back. "I don't know what's happening between us," I finally admitted, my voice barely more than a whisper. "But it shouldn't be happening." "Maybe it shouldn't," Alex agreed, his eyes holding mine, "but that doesn't make it wrong. Sometimes what we want most are the things we're afraid to admit." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Once again, he was right. I had been suppressing my feelings all night, pushing them aside because they didn't fit into the orderly life I had created. But here with Alex, in this quiet moment, I couldn't hide from them anymore. Almost without thinking, I reached out and touched his face, my fingers tracing along his jawline. He leaned into my touch, closing his eyes briefly before opening them again, the same intensity still present. Before I could stop myself, I closed the gap between us once more, pressing my lips to his in a kiss that felt both forbidden and inevitable. This time, there was no hesitation. The kiss was charged with all the desire and tension that had built between us. His arms wrapped around me, pulling me close, and I felt the warmth of his body against mine. Every touch, every kiss spun my mind, and I found myself surrendering to the sensation. We moved back toward the couch, never breaking contact, our hands exploring each other with an urgency that felt primal. When we finally collapsed onto the cushions, a rush of adrenaline surged through me. I had never felt anything like this before, such intensity and abandon. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. As Alex's hands moved over me, my breath quickened, my heart pounding. I knew we were treading into dangerous territory, and that what we were doing could have serious consequences. But in that moment, none of it mattered. All that existed was his touch, his kiss, and the way he made me feel. For the next hour, the world outside disappeared. It was just the two of us, tangled in a web of desire I couldn't break free from, even if I had wanted to. Each kiss, each touch, drew me further into the unknown, and I surrendered willingly. Eventually, reality set back in. As we lay together on the couch, our breathing heavy, I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. I thought about Emily, my husband, everything that had just happened. What had we done? How could things ever go back to the way they were? I pulled away from Alex, my mind racing with the weight of our actions. He looked at me, concern evident in his eyes. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, his hand reaching to touch my arm. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I was telling the truth. I didn't know how to make sense of any of this. I need to think, I whispered, standing and smoothing my clothes. "This is a lot," Alex nodded, understanding, though I could see the hurt in his eyes. He didn't want to stop any more than I did. "I'll give you space," he said quietly, also standing. "But please, don't regret this." I looked at him, my heart heavy with his words. I wasn't sure if I regretted it or not. All I knew was that my life had changed in ways I hadn't imagined, and I had no idea what to do next. As Alex left the room, I sank back onto the couch, my mind swirling with everything that had happened. I knew things between us would never be the same, and I had no clue how to handle the complicated situation we'd created. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more thrilling tales like this, be sure to like and subscribe to my channel. There's much more to come, and I promise you won't want to miss a moment of it.